Good. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. Had trouble opening.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Hannah Crapone. I'm the content marketing manager here at Certiport. We're so happy to have you joining us for our very first Certified Academy business webinar today. Now, feel free. I'm going to open up the chat here in just a second to tell us where you're joining us from and what courses you teach so that we can all get to know each other a little bit better. Now that the chat is open and we're all going to get to know each other, I wanted to just call out that this session is being recorded. So everyone who has registered for the session will receive a full link to the recording after our session has wrapped up this afternoon. But that does mean that everyone is currently on mute. So if you have a question, feel free to either drop that into the chat or the Q&A feature. We'll make sure to address those as we go throughout our presentation today. Now, I wanted to call out that our session today is being sponsored by the Communication Skills for Business Certification Program. The CSB certifications gives learners proof that they understand good communication and have the skills needed to be effective and efficient in their jobs. And for those interested in this program, we'll drop a link to more information about the CSB certification program here in just a moment. And today, for everyone who's joining us, hopefully you already know, this session we're going to be talking about the 4 C's of workforce readiness, and we'll be learning from Jennifer Stubblefield, veteran educator and Certiport's current customer success manager. So before we dive in, Jennifer, I wanted to give you just a quick chance to introduce yourself to everyone.
Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you live from my son's old bedroom turned home office. As she said, I taught school in Kentucky for forever. I'm as old as dirt. But when I retired, Certiport came calling and I was excited to join. And my job at Certiport is pretty easy. I don't sell anything, thank goodness. I retired from purchase orders, never want to touch those again. But my job is to help teachers teach. My minor, for you folks that are old enough to remember when you had minors in college, my minor was communication skills. And so I was fortunate enough to author for some of the curriculum that we sell from LearnKey. And so communication is a hidden passion of mine. Mm-hmm. I could talk about it all day, but I told Hannah, did I not? I said, Hannah, about 28 minutes in, you look at me and go,
and I see that I just have such a hard time doing that because I feel like you and I could chat for a long time. And this topic in particular is one that I know that we're both super passionate about.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here to talk about it.
Good. Right. And I wanted to just give us a chance to talk about soft skills, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, the 4 C's of workforce readiness, and we'll dive into what those are specifically in just a moment. But let's talk about soft skills. When we talk about that, what does that mean? And why are those important to our employers and for our students?
Well, first of all, and if you will drop this in the chat, I would love to see it. I'm watching you guys pull up, and I just think it's so cool that we have people on here from Ghana, West Africa today. I just think that's so cool. But anyway, what's another word for soft skills? Pop that in the chat. I've heard professional skills, workforce readiness skills, communication skills, employability skills. But at the end of the day, soft skills to me are things that are harder to teach because there's not the same measurement for them. For example, to me, a soft skill is leave things better than you found them.
Yeah.
You know, how dare you leave the copier jammed? What in the world? You know, a soft skill is whatever room you meet in, you leave it better than you found it. Mm-hmm. That's a soft skill. You know, I'm from the South, and I don't have a problem with saying I love it when, you know, someone stands up when I walk in the room to shake my hand. Mm-hmm. I don't care if it's male or female. To me, that's etiquette. And so that's a soft skill. It's hard to measure. And so to me, what are soft skills? They're the skills that make you a professional.
Yeah.
They're the skills that make you have camaraderie with others. They're the skills that make people want to sit with you at a meeting because they know you're going to be the professional one. You're going to be the one that knows how to behave, because we've all been in meetings with people who don't. But to me, that's kind of my everyday, what I would tell my students is your etiquette, your behavior skills, your skills on knowing when the right thing to do, the right thing is.
Well, and I'm loving looking in the chat here. We have soft skills help you keep your job, right? And that's like the short way to say it. It's not just this is what I can list on my resume. It's the stuff that helps you interact with other employees. It's how you act like a professional. So there's some fabulous comments here in the chat, and I'm loving seeing these.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've done a lot of research on, and that a lot of experts cite when they're talking about these soft skills, is the 4 C's. So communication, critical thinking, collaboration, and creativity. And while we know all of these can be incredibly important, it's like you mentioned, it's harder to teach these skills because they're more abstract. It's not something that you can have them perform a specific task and then say, check, they've learned how to be a good communicator. So I wanted to talk about ways that we can approach these topics in the classroom to make it more tangible, something that's a little bit easier for us to be able to wrap our heads around. So we'll start with just the first one, as it relates, of course, to the communication skills for business program. What are ways that we can help students develop and teach their communication skills?
First and foremost, I think if you're a new teacher and you're listening, or if you're someone that's just maybe perhaps interested in this for the first time, let's remember there's communication that's verbal, which is what I'm doing right now. There's communication that is nonverbal, the way you sit, the way you walk into the room, the way you dress. And then there's the written communication piece. Yeah. So there's different kinds of communication. So the answer is, how do you teach communication skills? Well, it depends on the category of communication. Yeah. In my particular world of teaching, I had to embed communication skills into every class. I did not have a business communications class. And if you do, and you're on this webinar, more power to you. I think it should be a required class, and good for you. I'm completely jealous. But for those of us who had to embed it into our curriculum, I let the English teachers teach a lot of the grammar. You know, they're the subject matter experts in that. Let them teach sentences and run-ons and such as that. But when you come to the world of business, we don't care about flowery language and adding, you know, colloquialisms. We care about short, sweet, to the point, time is money. And so you have to teach a little bit of that. But the biggest way I taught communication skills was role playing. I would set them up and I would take tape and draw out an elevator on the floor. And we would learn elevator etiquette by stepping into the elevator. And of course, they love it. They may be big physical kids, but they're just little kids. And so you role play with them. They're never going to forget that day that Miss Stubblefield made a blooming idiot of herself, showing all the stupid things that happen in elevators. Yeah. And the next time they go to get into an elevator, they're going to think, "Oh, don't do that. Don't talk on my phone in the elevator. I need to face forward. I need to give my space. You know, I don't need to have a confidential phone call while I'm on an elevator. I don't need to be eating when I'm on an elevator." All those things. They're never going to forget it. I would also take my students on field trips. And while we would be eating at a fine dining establishment, I would remind them what we learned in class 2 weeks ago when we had our plastic silverware and our paper plate, and we pretended that we were at a fine dining, and we remembered our etiquette. Where does the napkin go? So many interviews these days take place perhaps over virtual.
Right.
And they need to know how to act in this space. The face can't be here, you know, but you can't be so far, you know, it's etiquette of webinar. So how do you teach communication skills? You role play. That's the best way, in my opinion, is that you take a 10-minute commercial break in the middle of business law class, Microsoft certification class, and you teach communication by role playing. And you know what? It's gross motor movement. Usually it gets them up, it wakes them up. That's how I taught it for 27 years.
Well, I love that you talked about all of these different role play scenarios, and it brought me back to when I didn't get to take a business communication class until I was in college, which again, I wish I could have had that opportunity in high school. But one of the sections that I'll always remember is when we talked about interviewing skills. And our class, you had to be recorded which is just, it's so horrifying to look back on, right? Because you just learn so much about yourself. But you had someone in the class interviewing you and you were being recorded as you answered.
Wow.
And there's so many things that you don't realize that you do that can be distracting, that are not communicating the point that you want to. So having students learn about the communication that's nonverbal, body language, all of those types of things, I think there's a lot of value. And like you said, it's a life lesson that I think you never forget.
Well, for example, when I was in college, there was a student during his presentations that we had to peer critique, which is another teaching method that I use. And he had a nervous habit. And he would do this. We'd go one way with the nose and then we'd go another. He had no idea that he did that. And when the class brought it to his attention, he said, no, I don't. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
And he had no idea. Sometimes peer critiques, I love the recording. You watch yourself cringe, you know. Sometimes when I hear my accent on TV or on whenever I watch it on video, I'm like, oh no, you know, but it's hard, but it's important.
Yeah.
We say a lot of ums and ahs and and my pet peeve, every high school teacher, are you listening? My pet peeve was like, and like we went down to the restaurant and like I ordered tuna and like he ordered a hamburger and like it was so like good. Stop with the likes. And again, when you show someone that they feel empty space with words that have no use, they'll never forget it. And you got to do it easy with love. But to me, to answer your question, role play it out. I love the recording of it. That's even better.
Well, I just feel like there is not really a class that you have for most high school students where you talk about this. It's something that is more abstract, and so students don't have an opportunity to observe their own behavior in this way, and so it's a little bit tougher to be able to teach that. But what a valuable lesson. And I know another thing that we talk a lot about is these critical thinking skills. It's something that you'll see all over the news, that we say, you know, the new in-demand skill is going to be critical thinking. But how do you teach that? That's something that's so broad. And so I wanted to talk to you, get your ideas for how can we not just teach these soft skills as it relates to behavior, but as it relates to their patterns of thinking. How do we help students develop critical thinking skills?
I don't know who's listening that was also a club advisor. FBLA was my favorite. We've got horses, we've got hay, Kentucky rules, FBLA, right? So I was an FBLA sponsor. And one of the best ways that I taught critical thinking was I made sure that I incorporated my club into my classroom. As you know, every federal program in America has to have a CTSO, a club. And FBLA was the one that I used, and you may use DECA or BPA, whatever. But so many of those scenarios are critical thinking problems. And here's what I would do. I would bring those into my classroom and I would divide them into groups and I was, okay, solve the problem. And I know that, Hannah, you know this, but I'm a little bit of a micromanager, just a little bit. You know, we teachers tend to be that way.
I would never say that. I would never say that.
I'm type A, everything has its play. And you know what I had to learn to do as a teacher? And in my notes for today, I made sure I wrote this in big red ink so I wouldn't forget to say it. How do you teach critical thinking problems? You get out of their way and you let them fail. I would watch the groups and I would listen to their idea and I was thinking, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And sometimes I would let them hash it out and just, they'd realize, wait, what? For example, one time we were doing some house plans for something that we were drawing, the house plans, but like the perfect office, we were drawing this. And someone had a 2-story office with no elevator and no stairs. And I just kept watching it and I just kept letting it go. And then when they got ready to present their idea to me, I just asked, I said, oh, this is awesome, but how are the employees going to get up to the second floor? And their eyes were this big. And again, they'll never forget that. I bet they'll never forget to think about, entrances and exits because I let them fail. How do you teach critical thinking skills for employability? Get out of their way and let them fail. I had the best idea on every scenario I ever handed out, and I had the best idea. But you know what? I got out of their way and I did not have the best idea. To me, those are the 2 tips I could give any teacher that wants to do this. Get out of their way and let them fail. That's how they learn.
Well, and I think that plays into a lot of these other C's that we're talking about, right? Because you have to let students see how they naturally communicate before you can correct that behavior. You have to see what their usual thinking patterns are before you can introduce a new way of thinking. And that also goes into play with our third one, which is collaboration. And that can take a lot of different forms, and it doesn't always play out the way that we want to, because of course, communication is the underlying principle when it comes to collaboration. So how did you introduce that third C, collaboration, into your class?
Well, I was that student who hated group work and collaborating with other students because I wanted an A.
Right.
And I was like, no, let me do it. Just give it to me. I will do it. Everybody. Yeah. And that was hard. And so I tried so hard as a teacher to make sure and not let that happen. But I'm going to be honest with you. To me, the best way to teach collaboration is to sometimes pick the groups, because I didn't pick that I get to work with you, Hannah. I was assigned to you. You and I worked together because we were assigned. I picked groups. And if you put all of your type A micromanagers together, first of all, you're going to have a fight. So as you teach this in your classroom, I think grouping is very important. You're going to need the outspoken one in there, but you don't need 3 outspoken ones in there, right? So grouping is important. And number 2, I learned to use other classes for collaboration. For example, I had teachers all across America that taught Microsoft certification same way I did. And so I had teachers in Florida, for example, that all 30 of my students would send the same Excel project to them for them to collaborate with, and they had to fix the formulas. Like my student Johnny was paired with student Cindy down there, and then they would email it back and forth, Hannah, just like you and I email back and forth today. And you know what I found? The kids would go, you got to come look at this email. Look, it's in all lowercase letters. You would kill them. And things like that. They learned how bad it looks to have typos. Typos communicate something. Oh, they communicate, right? All lowercase letters with no punctuation. That communicates something. And as a professional, that's not what you want to emit.
Right.
And so I learned to let them get out of the classroom and maybe do some kind of like the old pen pals. So to me, that was a technique I learned, and it was great because especially in this work from world home that we do. I mean, you live on the East Coast. I live in Kentucky. Half of the crew we work with at Certiport is on the West Coast. So, it's important that we're teaching that. We're modeling it while teaching communication skills.
Well, I want to dive into a little bit more of the nitty gritty with that. So how did you make these connections with teachers in Florida so that you can introduce that into your curriculum?
Attending conferences, just to be frank. Of course, and I'm not just saying this for anybody who's listening, I attended Certified, which is the Certiport conference, which is honestly the best conference I've ever been to. I attended it 5 years before I was an employee. Okay. So I am being serious. I would meet these people who were teaching the exact same things I taught in Chicago public schools or Florida, or a school of 40 in Colorado, a whole school of 40. And we would sit together and realize no matter what demographic we had, we were all teaching the same thing. And I would pick up and I'd grab business cards and we would connect. Networking is key. And especially in this world we have where so much is online, I just made buddies, and I would email them and say, hey, you want to do this? Now, let's be honest, teachers, does it take a little more time? None of communications, as Hannah said at the beginning, is something that's going to be so easy. You've got to embed it. You've got to intentionally place these skills in your classrooms. I have students tell me all the time, Miss Stubblefield, I don't remember one thing you taught us in chapter 8 of accounting. But I remember when you took us to Ernst & Young on that field trip, and we got to watch the people actually reporting the debits and the credits into the system. That's what they remembered. Immerse these kids in these communication skills through various ways, and they're going to remember it.
Well, that brings us perfectly, I think, into the fourth C, which is all about creativity. And being a teacher that helps students learn valuable life lessons and remember it, that requires a lot of creativity, because you have to think of these out of the box lessons and ways to help students kind of stretch their own creative muscles before you can ask them to learn that. And I know this is something we've talked about a lot. In particular, we had a session last year about creative ways to teach communication in and of itself. But I know a lot of students don't feel creative. We traditionally frame it in a way that it's mostly about the arts. It's mostly about what you can do, like with your hands or with digital tools. But there's a lot of different ways to be creative. So I wanted to get your thoughts on how do you reframe creativity so that your students see themselves as creative and they can see you being creative in the class?
Well, in my classroom, we would look for the wordsmith. And the wordsmith would be the person who could write an email or send a letter in our fake company and fire you, but make you kind of feel okay about it. And so how do you teach creativity? Again, you find the ones in the classroom who think outside the box, and you let them loose on something. And so I would say, okay, how do you write a bad news letter? How do you write a bad news email? How do you send bad news to someone? And then also I would give them, okay, we have to fire Hannah. What avenue of communication do we want to use? Should we email her? Should we text her? Of course, all the kids just want to text it. Let's just text her and tell her she's fired. And so you have to let their creative juices flow and realize, okay, what's the right etiquette? But then once you decide the right avenue, now who can write the best email to fire Hannah, who is a remote worker, without letting Hannah she's going to feel okay about it. I just kept giving them live scenarios. And again, I got out of their way. The creativity is you're going to look for the wordsmith who's going to help you. And instead of saying, don't let the door hit you on the way out, you've got to make sure the wordsmith in the classroom goes, wait, I have a better idea. And I did a lot of things on my smart board. I'd start out with a paragraph, and then we would just back, read it, and back. And we would just get it until we all agreed. Would you be okay if you received that? And then, that's how we did it. Group collaboration, creativity, and I let the wordsmiths in the room do the talking.
Well, I think it's so interesting how much these 4 C's are interconnected. We talk about them individually, but once you start introducing one into your classroom, I think the others are going to naturally follow. And I know there are educators who are listening who are saying, how can I bring this more into the classroom? So what would be your recommendation if I have, I want to adjust my curriculum to make sure I'm focusing on these 4 C's? What would be the best way to start?
Well, I can speak from true experience. Again, I did not have a communications textbook. I did not have a communications course. I got a call one day from my Certiport rep in Kentucky, and they said, hey, we're starting this new communication, idea here. Would you be interested in helping with it, writing the objectives, and so I got involved. And then once I got involved, I got on the Certiport website and I had those objectives. And I thought, if this is what the nation's largest testing company says, these are the communication skills that matter. I just would look, and I would look at my Microsoft class, and I would think, which 5 of these can I put in that class? Because let's be honest, you cannot put all 40 in there.
Right.
If you think you can, you're living in a dream world, right? You can't. Let's be honest. And then I would look at my office administration class. What 10 could fit in there naturally? Then I would look at this, and then I would look at this. I took all of my classes, embedded them, and then at the end of their senior year, I thought, you know what? Those kids that have had 4 or more business classes, I bet they're pretty trained in business communication skills. And I was blessed to have geometrics the last 3 years, the last 7 years I taught. And the last 3 years I taught, I gave the communication skills for business certification. And here's the truth, folks. I would let them do a couple practice tests. I didn't even look at the grades. I said, yes, sit down and get it done. And then I made every senior who had taken 4 more business class have the piece of paper that said, you're going to be taking this. Okay. And they wanted to take it because they'd already been bit by the bug of getting their certifications with Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Some of them have entrepreneurship, and they set for the communication skills. And you know what? They passed it. So I am living proof that what resources you have to use, folks, you're the resource. You are such a great resource. I proved it. I did it that way and it worked. Now, if you are blessed with one of those districts that has some money, I was not one of those, then, you know, we are a software company that sells unbelievable resources. And we have some great resources. Like I said, I was honored to author one of the ones that we sell from LearnKey. And, you know, it's pretty straightforward. And it's me being very frank and honest. And it's me, you know, speaking just like I am now, kind of being entertaining, sometimes trying to keep the kid from falling asleep. But we have companies across America that are adopting that software and asking their employees to sit for it. If they want a promotion, they got to pass that test. If they want a pay raise, they're going to get that certification.
Right.
If their interns want a permanent job at this company, they have to pass that test. And I just love that. And so how do you incorporate it? There's so many different ways, but embedding it is the easiest way, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, to that point, we've actually had some questions come through in the chat, and I love this first one. Any suggestions for substitution of role play for online classes?
Well, kids love to make videos. I mean, I cannot believe I'm going to use the word TikTok. I'm so sorry for everyone that's listening. I can't believe I just said that. But kids love to make videos. Get a group of 3 online kids and say, okay, folks, I need you to figure it out. I need you to figure it out. How are you going to teach this concept of elevator etiquette? How are you going to teach the concept of posture and poise when you walk into a job interview? How are you going to teach that? Because your job is to make a 30-second video that will teach this. Folks, they get into that. They do it all the time anyway. Go where the kids are. And online people, you know, let them collaborate online, get the videos made, and have somebody that's going to put it together on their phone, submit it. It's a group grade. And you know what? The rest of the class will love making them and watching them. They'll love watching them. And, you know, your online kids, that's one way for your online kids to get to know each other too.
Yeah. Yeah. Increase that collaboration too, right? Which can be more difficult, of course.
And they learn to speak with each other. And you know what else? You know what else? They learn to meet deadlines. It's so good for your kids to learn. Yeah, you know what, Miss Stubblefield, I'd be glad to finish this project. But Susie Jane over there, well, she can't tie her shoes nor meet a deadline. And they learn what it's like to work in a place where other people slow you down. They learn not to be that person. And that is a communication skill.
Absolutely. Yeah. Punctuality for sure. Well, in thinking about that and the timing of things, another question was, how do we make sure we're embedding these additional principles in the right portion of our curriculum? At what time, when we're teaching other lessons, do we inject some of these other ideas?
Well, I'm kind of a high energy person, and therefore I expect that most people get a little tired of that. But at the same time, students didn't fall asleep in my classes. So I had a 90-minute period. Okay. So if you're listening to me and you're a block teacher, I had a 90-minute block. I took commercial breaks all the time. You know, I would teach, do bell ringers, do the things. But then, you know, 45 minutes in, if they have still had their hiney in that chair for 45 minutes, get them up. You know, I would call company meetings. Okay, folks, we're gonna have a company meeting. Everybody roll your chairs, come on. And just the rolling of the chair gets the blood going, it gets the brain going. And then we'd have an employee meeting, and maybe that day I was teaching the handshake, how to properly handshake. Maybe that day I was teaching eye contact. Maybe that day I was having them all non-verbally show me that they're bored. You know, just show me that. remember, when you're at a meeting or whatever, you're trying to communicate that you're listening. If you're doing this, you really may be listening, but you're communicating, I'd rather be anywhere but here. And so I broke it up so that the kids had gross motor movement and, change of pace in the classroom. So how did if that's what they're asking, how do you know when to put it in? And of course, I wanted the first 2 weeks of my course to be so awesome that they wouldn't consider dropping it, because I was an elective. And also I wanted the PR to get out with, dang, that's fun. That's a fun class. And so the first 2 weeks of every course I ever taught, I brought out all the tricks. And so
in thinking about that, then, is this something, if I'm already midway through my semester, which I know a lot of teachers are now that we're toward the end of January, do you think it's too early, too late to course correct if they want to embed some things? When's the best time to adjust?
Well, to me, a Monday. I gave class calendars because, again, type A, everything was So every month my class had a calendar that would let them know what day we're doing lunch and learns, what day we had a guest speaker. Now, could that calendar adjust? Yeah, because I was in charge. Hey, me and Hannah get emails all the time. Things at Certiport change, we have to adjust, right? But they had a calendar. And so you folks that are listening, February is getting ready to start. Start February, March, April, May. You've got 4 more. Some of you may go to June. You've got 4 or 5 more months of school. And, start saying, I'm going to start doing these little things. You folks that teach seniors, after prom, they don't have a brain. So maybe you want to start embedding it right now. You know that after prom, you're going to do 2 weeks of communication skills as it relates to your curriculum or your course. I don't have an answer to that. That's probably a one all do all, because
a blanket answer, right?
Yeah.
I think it
but
changes.
it's never too late. Oh my gosh, no, it's not too late.
Well, I just feel so energized by this conversation, and I know that there's a lot of teachers who feel the same way. So thank you so much. I wanted to give you one last chance, Jennifer, to share any final closing thoughts. Just
remember this. My daddy always told me, he said, you can tell a lot by a man by looking at his shoes. And I used to think, what? And the older I get, the more my daddy was so smart, because I would teach my students, if your shoes are dirty, if your shoes are worn, if your shoes have scuffs, and that's the way you show up for work. Are you putting your best foot forward? Because you may be the smartest one, you may be the best one for that job, but you're communicating that I can't even take care of my shoes, let alone handle your $4 million account, right? Use some wisdom and know that we older folks know first impressions really do matter. Can you be wrong? Absolutely. Have I ever had a wrong first impression about a person? Absolutely. But you may never get a second chance to make a first impression. And I know that's an old adage that's been around for years, but folks, emphasize that to your students, for you may be the only one who ever formally teaches them workplace readiness skills like these 4 C's. So it's an opportunity that I hope, if you're listening, you don't waste. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really appreciate that. And Ty, I know we have you on here as well. If I could just have you pop back on video, if that's okay. I wanted to give you a chance to talk about what's happening in next week's session.
Thank you for clarifying. So I'm not over CSP, but I can tell you in PMI, we have an exciting topic next week. We are in the process of, we call it a revamp or an overhaul of the PMR exam. And it's going to be released in April. There's a lot of effort behind it. We have, I think, about 10 teachers who are really good subject matter experts in project management that are helping create the exam and the learning content. So I think that it's a really good class. It will fit in every class, I should say. Project management's a really relevant field. It's, there's no industry that project management doesn't touch. So anyways, I'm starting to go on a ramble because it's just, there's a lot to talk about with it. I'm excited. I have a background in project management myself. I'm just excited to show how it can fit in the class and some of the previews that we're coming up with in March.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ty. So I just dropped the link to the details for next week's session into the chat. We'll be talking about the benefits of project management skills, how you can start embedding that into your curriculum, and to Ty's point, a little bit more about the PMI Project Management Ready certification exam. And I see that Jennifer's also dropped her information into the chat, so thank you so much for doing that. The final question that we just had was if we'll get an invite for next week's session. So just so you're aware of the cadence of these, we'll be having them every Wednesday from here until March. And the link will be the same for all of the webinars. So you can use the link from the email that you just got this week. We'll also be sending out a reminder before each session, so you don't need to save it at the top of your inbox. If you just want to wait until the next one comes, use that link. That would be great. So thank you all so much for joining us. We hope to see you all with us next week as well, and we'll be in touch. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon.